This podcast is dedicated to sharing the practice of meditation, the philosophy of Western Buddhism, and the refuge and love of our TBC Sangha. Offering solutions that are simple, practical, and true. We believe happiness and better health are available to all people and for all people. We are here each week to lend wisdom and support to all who are making or considering making this journey. This is On the Range.
Hello and welcome. This is All on the Range. I'm your host, Whit, and I'm very pleased to welcome our special guest co-host for episode number 1. He's the director of TBC and a all-around good egg, Mr. Victor Dougherty. Welcome, Victor.
Hi, Whit. Now I'm hungry. I'm thinking of an egg salad sandwich.
That's a good start. That was not one of the things I thought we'd cover. Victor, you've been key, just like any other project with TBC, in kind of getting this off the ground, providing guidance, providing good ideas across the board. We thank you for that, of course. But I wanted to just begin by, the podcast is set up to address Western meditation or Western Buddhism, meditation, and TBC in particular. And so I'd like to start with just a little bit about how you got here. I think it's important on episode number 1. Again, you touch everything that goes on at TBC, and I think that's a good place to begin. So if you don't mind.
Sure. No, great question. And I'll even back it up just a little bit further, just as to the humble beginnings of TBC, or Temple Buddhist Center itself. It was started in 1996 by my teacher, Ben Worth. And I still have coffee with him every Saturday, even to this day. He's long retired, though. And then it went through a series of changes. Ben left in about 2008, and I went with him. And then one of my classmates, another student under Ben by the name of Janet Taylor, she took over. And then she ran Temple Buddhist Center for, about 8 years, I think. And then after she left, as she actually moved to India to be with her daughter, after she left, TBC kind of struggled for a little while, about a year. And it was, there was a director, his name was Ron Pawo. But for whatever reason, Temple Buddhist Center was not doing too well. And so the senior minister at Unity Temple, as well as some members of the community, asked me to direct. And so I was on sabbatical at the time, and now we kind of transitioned to my part of it. I was on sabbatical from teaching high school. I taught high school for 23 years. And so I was on sabbatical, and when this opportunity came to me, and what's kind of funny is I remember running back to my teacher, Ben, and I was panicked, and I'm like, oh my gosh, Ben, they want me to lead the Sangha. And I was kind of freaked out. I said, I'm not ready for that. And Ben looked at me and he said, do you know how you know you're ready? Because it was offered to you. And so, I got over my fear and went ahead and I accepted the position, and I contacted the school district and said, hey, it's been great, guys, but I think I'm going to try something else for a little while. And it wasn't after, goodness, just about 2 months, maybe 3 months of being there, that I realized literally my whole life, everything, marriages, careers, ups and downs, all of it was preparing me for this, to direct a community of practitioners who, practice under the teachings of the Buddha. So it was really quite an eye opener. And so this is now my 8th year, I think, of being director at TBC, and it's been a wonderful experience, and we're just thriving, and it just warms my heart every time I think of it.
Oh. Well, as you were talking, it kind of dawned on me, with Western Buddhism, with the teachings and the path that you're on, and frankly, members of your Sangha as well, including myself. Do you feel like as people get better in touch with themselves, it allows them to expand more in the world and become, like with you speaking, you didn't know at the time that maybe this was where you needed to be, and it's turned out so well. I feel like that's probably true for other members as they reach a certain point with their journey.
Yeah, and it also is, of course, a little bit different for different people. But the point that you're making, and I think you're right on, is that it absolutely offers tangible practices, methods, techniques for people to really grow and transform, and it's, of course, it utilizes a lot of psychological principles. Buddhism, is very has a tremendous aspect of psychology to it. And then with these methods, meditation, mindfulness, these techniques, and then added is really the spiritual basis and undertone of it. And what I mean by that is helping people realize oneness, helping people realize anatta or selflessness, helping people to realize that there are completely different ways of being in the world, far different than what they'd ever known before. That's kind of that spiritual aspect of it. So it works through all these different ways and helps people of all different backgrounds to start to get in touch with something that feels and seems much greater than they are as an individual, or what we call the small self.
Yeah, it seems to me that as you practice and as you move through this, I keep saying journey, but as you follow this path, whatever, I think as you start to strip away some of the, whatever it is you're carrying around, the fears or frustration.
The bag of rocks, the Buddhist said, the bag of rocks.
Right. Once you realize, I think it's interesting as you strip through that or walk through that stuff, I think what you end up with not only is your true self, but also a true spiritual presence. It's not really a religion, but like I said, if you want holiness and you want sacredness, you got to bring it. It's in you, and this is how you get there. I was curious what you might think of that.
Oh yeah, no, well said. I appreciate that. Many times teachers have talked about condensing or boiling Buddhism down. And one teacher used to say that you could boil Buddhism down to basically two things, and that is self-inquiry and self-discipline. Obviously that's arguable. Other people might say something else. The Dalai Lama, when asked to boil down Buddhism, thought for a moment, and he said, shaping intention. But what grows from all these different teachings and methods and techniques and practices are all kind of pointing at the same thing, which is this awakening, this awakening from thought, this realizing that all these beliefs and thoughts and seeing the true nature of reality instead of seeing it through our own glasses, that's part of that perspective shift, right? When you realize that you've been wearing these goggles and filtering everything through that, then you wake up to realizing that, oh my gosh, there's so much more that I don't know. And that's really expansive, right? It's just very, very vast and expansive. And that helps us to start to come from more of a perspective of being than doing. And that shifts a lot of things for a lot of people.
Right. I find it interesting. I ended up at TBC and I ended up being Buddhist, which is always funny for me to say because Buddhists that really follow the practice don't really like to go around going, I'm a Buddhist.
Right.
It's like, don't say it. Don't say it. It's okay.
Right.
But so I practiced on my own for 20 plus years, just sitting. And I didn't have a teacher. I read some books, certainly. But what I found was, as I built practice, I found peace and I found space to better deal with things, and awareness, acceptance, and patience were my kind of my mantra, and they still are. The other thing I thought was interesting was, at a certain point, I became aware of you and we became friends, and then I started attending TBC. So I think I'm a little bit different in that I started from 20 years ago and sat my way to this point. In your mind, what's the importance of meditation to this whole thing? How's it important, and how does it work, or why does it work? That might be a better question.
Yeah. One of my teachers used to say, people come to me and say, I can't meditate because I can't control my thoughts. And so my teacher would always respond, meditation is not about controlling your thoughts. It's so your thoughts don't control you. And so the really important aspect of meditation, and of course, again, I'm not claiming absolute, information or knowledge here, but for me and for
I'm already telling people this is absolute.
right, yes, it's all knowing. For myself and the folks within the community, our roots are in Theravada Buddhism, and there's a real pragmatic approach. Meditation really helps an individual to discover for themselves, right? Again, with spirituality, no one can tell you what your connection to the divine or higher power is. It's something it must be experienced by the individual, and so that's another aspect of the spiritual within Buddhism. But meditation itself as a tool helps one to discover and realize for themselves what we call in Buddhism the three marks of existence. Existence is selfless, it is impermanent, and it is unsatisfactory. That's that dukkha, right? There's a suffering aspect. And again, I want to be sure and say this, that is not a mandate. It is an observation that existence, there's a selfless aspect to existence, which is probably far beyond the scope of our show today. But we could do a whole show on anatta or selflessness, but impermanent, and also it is unsatisfactory. So when a person begins to see all that, then they have kind of, in essence, formed the observer. Trungpa Rinpoche used to call that the one who knows, the one who sees. And when that, all of a sudden, when that happens, then it's a complete 180-degree shift. You are no longer angry. You are aware of anger in the body. You are no longer sad. You are aware of sadness in the body, because who you truly are can't be angry or sad. It's not possible. And realizing that, we are awareness. We're not the body or the thoughts or the feelings. And that's what meditation helps a person to discover on their own. I mean, think about it this way, right? I just did a talk at the Welcome House earlier this week, which is a home for folks recovering from addiction. And we were talking about this, actually. And it's like, okay, let's meditate for 10 minutes. And I dare you, I double dog dare you to not have any thoughts. Do not have any thoughts, okay? Whatever you do, don't allow that. And so I hit the bell. We went into meditation. And then afterwards, I'm like, okay, who didn't have any thoughts? And of course, there's always one or two wisecrackers in there who are like, oh, I didn't have any thoughts, but everybody else is like, there was tons of them. And what that teaches us is that the thoughts come unbidden. In other words, we're not the thinker of thoughts. And this is radical. This is off the charts. And when a person can experience that, and then they have that aha moment, it's like, wait a minute. I can have a thought, like if I say, mocha frappuccino, I can have that thought. I can see it. I know where to go get it, all that kind of stuff. But it's like a bicycle going down a hill really, really fast with no brakes. I can add to it, right? I can pedal more, make it go faster, but I can't stop it. So who's actually driving the bus here?
Right. Although you just mixed metaphors there with bike and bus.
Oops. Who's driving the bicycle here?
Either way. So yeah, you hit upon it there, just that our true being, our true selves is awareness. And I find that to be so radically freeing once you can begin to understand it. And I think it also speaks to the importance of meditation, because I can tell you that, hey, what you are is awareness. Okay. But until you practice and develop some space, it kind of kicked around in your own head and realize, hey, that's true. I'm not controlling this. And, I am watching something, so I must be the watcher and not these thoughts.
Yes.
It changes
Exactly.
everything.
Oh, it does. It really does. It's a 180-degree thing. And also, of course, what we know is that these teachings and these methods and practices, they offer us, every individual, an opportunity to discover that, realize that for themselves. But sometimes we don't know what we're experiencing. We don't know what we're feeling. People have sent me text messages and called at the end of a 30-minute meditation going, my gosh, I had this crazy experience and I don't know what it's almost like an out-of-body experience like that, And so that's the role of the Sangha and the teachings and the teachers, to help people settle down. You're all right. This is different. This is radical, but it doesn't mean you're broken or crazy or anything. You're cultivating, in a case like that, you're cultivating the observer. The witness is what they also sometimes call it, which is not enlightenment, but it is an important level, I would think, of awakening. My friends in the Vajra video, or the Tibetan lineage, like Ani, I'm sure would have a better explanation of that than I. But in a nutshell, all of a sudden that witness pops up, like you were just saying. All of a sudden I'm watching the body, make breakfast. That's weird. Usually I'm in my mind and there are 40,000 thoughts about what I need to do the rest of the day. And then there's an occasional thought about what I didn't do yesterday. And that's the
toast while that was going on.
Yeah, exactly. That's the machinations and the normal modus operandi. But all of a sudden, when there's peace and there's stillness and not a huge parade of thoughts and emotions going by, then I'm just all of a sudden watching the form that we all call Victor make breakfast. And it's like you said a moment ago, it's very expansive, it's vast, it's incredibly peaceful, and there's no judgment, there's no commentary, there's no decision making.
I'm going to switch gears just for a moment, because again, this is one of those things where it's like, hey, let's talk about meditation for 10 minutes. And you realize that you could talk for 10 years about meditation. So, but we're going to stick to what we had scheduled. Western Buddhism is obviously it's the bedrock of TBC, mostly because we're Buddhists in the Western Hemisphere. But I was curious, what are your thoughts or your feelings? What makes it different than Eastern or standard Buddhism? And where do you see it going if you want to take a swing at that?
Well, it's an amazing thing. I mean, Buddhism, as you and I have discussed, when it comes into any culture or any society, doesn't come as a conqueror. It comes as a pilgrim. It's open, it's accepting, it's loving, it's kind, and it works with what is there, right? It doesn't say, oh, you're missing all this and you need to build 14, giant cathedral. There's nothing missing. It works with what's there. And so obviously when it came into Japan, what was there was this idea of self-discipline and this rigidity, do the work. And so that's when Zen was born, and when Buddhism came into Tibet and some over in the other Asian countries there next to India, it blended with the religion that was there called Bon, and that's why the Tibetan religion has deities and a theology and a cosmology, things like that. And again, none of this is good, bad, right, or wrong. It works. Buddhism works through all of these. It's kind of amazing that way. So it's been with a little over 60 years since Buddhist teachers started arriving here in the West. Buddhism kind of crash landed into the counterculture with the Beatles and the hippies and Paramahansa Yogananda. Yoga showed up, meditation showed up, Buddhist teachers. And so it's as it arrived here in the West, it took on some interesting changes. Westerners were not, interested in theology and cosmology. In other words, Buddhism blended with psychology. Carl Jung and Freud, that are here because that's been very big here in the West for several decades. Is all about psychology and the frontier of the mind, if you will. And so here's how it kind of changed. As Buddhism came into the West, it's not all about enlightenment. Many people who found Buddhism in the 60s saw nirvana as the ultimate peak experience. And then a decade later, all these recovering hippies were painfully finding out that Buddhism is much more concerned with reshaping character and behavior than big, mystical experiences. Younger Buddhists today are more often fired up by social action than mysticism.
Right.
It doesn't focus on monks, right? In most Asian countries, Buddhist monks are the real practitioners, focusing on meditation and study, while the lay people of the village or the community support them. Distinctions between monks and lay people, that doesn't really fit with modern American society. And so Western monastic orders are pretty scarce. Non-monastic practitioners, such as Temple Buddhist Center, are very serious, and they are really the power behind the movement now, much more than any monasteries or Western monk orders and things like that. It's the local sangha that's doing the heavy lifting, so to speak. Also, what's interesting is the schools of Buddhism are kind of mixing together. America is the great melting pot, right? And so the schools of Buddhism, they're all coming, and they're also kind of mixing together. Asian Buddhist teachers assumed that they would establish their existing schools in the Western countries. So we have Western Zen, Western Theravadan. But what's fascinating is that the boundaries are breaking down. As Western Buddhists, motivated by common needs, explore the whole Buddhist tradition. And so the emerging Western Buddhist world is essentially kind of non-denominational. It's really kind of fascinating. So, and then again, also here in the West, people take what they need, not what they're given. And so for all the talk of lineage and transmission and the purity of the teachings, which I'm not putting those down, those are very important, and I hope that they continue, of course, but the Western Buddhism is driven much more by the students' needs, the needs of the community, and as much as the teacher's wishes. So, it's responding to what people are asking for, not just sitting up there and giving them all the teachings, right? Also, look at mindfulness. That's a $1 billion industry in the United States now. Mindfulness is where Buddhism and the West actually meet. Buddhist mindfulness practices are being applied to everything from mental health treatment to eating out. We're seeing a mindfulness boom, so to speak. So these approaches apply core Buddhist insights to modern living, making this the biggest development in Western Buddhism since the 60s. So we're really on a cusp, we're on a wave here, Whit. Western Buddhism is really on the forefront now. As people are leaving religion, they're still looking for a spiritual practice, and they're truly finding a home in Western Buddhism.
Oh, go ahead, Victor. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, you made about 1,000 good points there. I just wanted to hit on a couple from my experience.
Yeah.
The thing that makes Western Buddhism in particular so important and valuable to me is that, as you mentioned, it shows up as a pilgrim and it fits in with wherever it lands. And so the flexibility and just how practical it is, and the fact that at the end of the day, again, if you want this to be sacred, if you want this to be important, if you want to have a life built around these sort of teachings, you certainly can, but you have to do it. It's
Right.
You can show up every Sunday and listen to Victor, and a lot of people do that. That's great. But you can also take an active role through having a practice, through starting to serve the community. And
Yes.
the Sangha and TBC are so incredibly well suited for those tasks.
Yes.
I also love the fact that it feels to me like Western Buddhism is so pliable and kind of revolutionary in that it will take from its members. And I'm not trying to belittle teachers or teachings, but I've discussed this before. I think anybody can play a prominent role as long as they show up, they're sincere, they're speaking from the heart,
Yeah.
they're trying to serve. And there's this ability to lessen the suffering in your life by opening up, by knowing yourself, by accepting what you get, including other people. So it's just so groundbreaking, and it's, it fits everyone. It helps with addiction. It helps with depression.
Oh my
It
gosh.
helps
Yeah.
with boredom. I don't care what it is.
Yeah.
This can give you a real positive direction in your life, and you get to know yourself, and that's the best self you can be. So
Absolutely. And once you know who you are, you know who everyone is.
Right.
That's the oneness. That's the realizing that, oh my gosh, fear, depression, anxiety. When I realize that I'm not the only person feeling those, because, once I realize that, our problems, we all have, the same general problems. I mean, individually, they're like different, but, we all have worry, we all have loss, we all have, pain and pleasure. And,
Right.
and all those things help us to kind of realize that, we're in this together.
right, and that there's
one-
no good news, no bad news. There's just news.
Yeah.
It again, you freeze yourself from that, from judging, from fear, from wanting.
Yeah.
And that takes a lot of practice, right? That's not,
It
it's, I can
does.
tell you that, you can tell me to, hey, quit judging stuff, Wade. And it's like, okay, I'll get back to you in 35 years, because it takes a while. It's
Right.
the first thing you learn as a baby is to judge, because that's how you communicate with your parents. Do you like this? Is this too hot? What else can I get you? It's not your parents' fault per se. That's how you deal with a baby. But nobody grabs you at 12 and says, okay, you're not a baby anymore. Let's quit doing that. They just kind of send you on your way. Before we wrap this up, I was hoping we could just touch real briefly on TBC. That's kind of where we started. And what I wanted your opinion on, or your strategy, is TBC is obviously a very welcoming community, and you can go and join, and amazing things can happen to the individuals, to the Sangha, to the community because of TBC. One of the other things I really like about it, or am I don't know if proud, that seems like the wrong word for a Buddhist, but is also the use of the Sangha as a refuge for people, because you know better than anybody. Sometimes people come in and they're desperate, and you see them for 3 weeks in a row, and they're so moved, and then you never see them again. And they, unfortunately, probably go back to where they started, but they're there for a while. That space is always open. That our Sangha is always open to anybody who needs it. And I just wanted you to talk about that duality if that's probably the wrong word, but you know what I mean, of what the Sangha provides.
Well, yes. I mean, I think, again, without getting into comparing mind, again, it's not good, bad, right, or wrong that one meditates alone or that one meditates, in a room with 85 to 100 people. However, they are different. And so, people oftentimes share with me, coming on Sunday morning and meditating, being in stillness and silence for an extended amount of time with the community is a very powerful experience. Everyone's doing their work. I mean, there are no Democrats or Republicans. There's no gay, straight, tall, black, white, heavy, thin. None of that exists as we open our hearts and we just share consciousness with each other. All of that goes away, and there's just being, and there's oneness. So there's that feeling. But again, I'm not saying that that's better and that people don't experience that when they meditate by themselves. But Sangha can offer that sometimes as just a different way to meditate. Obviously, it can offer things like a connection and community, networking, all those regular things as well. But the Sangha, within Buddhism, Sangha is actually a whole way of life in itself. It's like there is no one that's not Sangha. And everything that I say and do, even if I'm alone, I want to remember, is this something that I would do with Sangha present? And that helps us, that kind of gives us sort of a little bit of accountability in our practice, so to speak. So it's really on so many levels, a practice all on its own, that idea of Sangha or community. And it's also, like you said, as let's say there's 100 people in the Sangha, okay? We actually have a lot more than that. But let's just say there's 100 people in the Sangha. 5 of them have awakened experiences, and they share that with the Sangha. And then people within the Sangha will resonate, and then they'll, begin working with their practice. In other words, when we see people around us having awakened experiences, it gives us permission. It's no longer this goal that keeps moving, as in, other faith-based traditions where, the only way you can get there is to die.
That's a tough sell. Week in and week out, that is a tough sell.
That's right.
And that's so true with my experience, sitting in the audience and growing with the Sangha. The number of just incredibly kind, caring, real people, and it's not, I know that the Sangha at TBC in particular is very different, but it's such a pleasure to be around. And at first you go and you try to find your way and you try to decide whether you should walk out during the chanting part, because that's always a big challenge.
Right.
And you start to realize, hey, I'll dip my toe. But before you know it, it just becomes so much part of your life, just because, like I said, these are such great people, and it's such a great, powerful tool, and it's so accessible. So, Victor, I want to thank you for taking the time and for sharing your wisdom with us. It's always a pleasure, and every conversation, I learn a little bit more, and most of the time it's good. So that's also a real positive. I will invite everyone that is listening to visit the Discord channel. And you can leave a comment or a question there for All on the Range. We will do this again next week. So thank you again, Victor. And thank you all for listening to All on the Range. And we'll be back in a week. Happy trails and namaste.
Thank you to Mr. Tim Behrens for producing this episode, and thank you to Brad Athey for providing the music. And thank you to our listeners for joining us on this journey as we discuss meditation and Western Buddhism and celebrate the path to a happier and healthier life. Less suffering and more joy are available to all people. While we cannot control what happens to us, we can control how we react. It just takes practice. Until next time, stay grounded and find peace in the simple, practical solutions. This is Om on the Range, wishing you happy trails.